You know, when I started doing these talks about demographics and trends, I got a piece of advice from somebody that I trust quite a bit, and they basically said the things you got to remember is, number one, don't try to tell a joke. Number two, don't try to sound too intelligent. Just be yourself. The third point, they said, be brief. And I promise to be brief today, regardless of how long it takes. You know, when we look at the region, when we look at our region I guess it was about 4 or 5 years ago, there was a serious rekindling of what we call regionalism. And at that time, the folks that put most of it together set a template of looking not as comparative basis, but as a trend basis of what the population for our primary, close, 4 consolidated areas look like. I know most of what you hear and see and read about population is done on a 10-year basis. I like to look at it year-over-year percentage change, because what that shows you is, if you look at the projections for 2021, of course it shows our area moving down, Asheville moving down dramatically, Chattanooga and Knoxville continuing on the growth pattern. Now, when this is moving down, bear in mind, this is year-over-year change. Ever since this point here in about 2016-17, we started growing. We moved past those years where we were actually losing population. Our growth rate for the region, for our consolidated area, has been about 0.3 to 0.2% per year. That's year-over-year change. And in other words, big picture, we're slowly growing. And the reason we're slowly growing is the same problem that Asheville has. Asheville itself is growing like mad, but it's the only city in its consolidated area that is growing. If you look at the 2021 population projections, I'm sorry, I've got so many things in my hand here. That's better, I assume. The reason those population numbers look like that, and we'll bring it down locally, if you look at the 2021 numbers for our population projection, the area here with the strongest growth rate was Rogersville. It had a 1% year-over-year growth rate. Next was Kingsport and Johnson City, and then Greenville. When you get outside that, the other folks are losing population. So the gains that you hear about most often have to make up for the losses that are occurring in the other regions. Well, I'm going the wrong direction here. Sorry about that. The reason we're in this population conundrum is the same reason the nation is in it. For about the last 20 years, the Tri-Cities has been in what we call a negative natural population growth. That simply means that more people were dying than being born. It has, and this is for the region right now. You can see that deaths have steadily been increasing more than the birth rate. This chart only goes for the last decade, but One. When you look at that, when you look at the death and the birth rates on a year-over-year basis, that year-over-year change that we talked about earlier, you can see the effect that the pandemic had. Our death rate went up dramatically. Our birth rate went down dramatically, and the death rate went dramatically down. It hasn't recovered yet. The birth rate, I'm sorry, and the death rate has escalated. This will probably, the death rate, this will probably come down next year. It's a little accelerated right now because of the pandemic.
Birth rate ought to go up.
Right.
Well, you'd like to think so, because all of our problems would go over. All of our problems would end if the birth rate would go up. However, locally and nationally, it's going down, and the folks who are the experts in that are not looking for it to do any improvement until we see a rather dramatic improvement in the economy. There was a lot of speculation when we went into the pandemic, because everybody was going to be confined to their homes, that we'd have a baby boom. The demographers said, nah, it'll probably be a little bit different because people don't have families when they're not sure of the economy. The demographers are right. The situation we've got now, based off that population growth, or that negative natural population growth, is we've got a big hole in our population bucket. On average, a little over 4,400 people a year leave the Tri-Cities. Last year, close to 8,000 people died. That basically means we have to attract 34 new families a day just to stay even. That works out to about 12,000 people a year. That's why what Jeff does and what I write about is so important. Without attracting new residents, we don't have population growth. Compounding that is we are on the leading edge of a very rapidly aging population. In that period that our friend is holding the sign up, 20 to 24, an average of 30 Tri-City residents a day turned 65. Because of our current age spread, the same number holds for people turning 70 every day. That'll go on for about the next 10 years. In 2020, 21% of everybody in the Tri-Cities was over 65. At the rate we're moving now, in about I think in another 3 years, another 3 or 4 years, 1/4 of our population will be 65 and older. That puts us in, if we were a country, the World Health Organization classifies as a super-aged community. Nationally, I think it's 2060, the entire nation will be 1/4 65 and older. That poses both economic and population problems. Economic in that as your population ages, it ages out of the workforce. As it ages out of the workforce, unless there's something to replace it, the economy, the GDP declines. We've seen that. We continue to see it. The project for population projections at the Tennessee State Data Center was just completed earlier this month. The data center is an extension of the Census Bureau. And the folks at UT are actually pretty good with their projections. What they're looking at for Sullivan County right now is our current population growth. They see that ending in 2030. After that, they see Sullivan County starting to decline again. Realistically, since you're talking about straight linear projections off of what existed in the past, that doesn't take into account anything that John Rose and Jeff are doing. Hopefully we'll prove them wrong. Otherwise, after 2030, we're in for a period of population decline. This is just a quick chart that I pulled out of a Realtor.com database that shows who's looking at moving to Sullivan County. I know Jeff gets direct inquiries. What this is it shows you how many people are looking at existing home ads for Sullivan County. You've got to go down to number 4 before you get outside the state. But the point to remember, is that better than half of all the traffic and people that are interested in real estate for our county are from outside the region. That's what the population projection for Washington County looks like. They're on a steady growth plane. Out of the 7 counties that are included in those projections, it's the only county that has a growth rate that looks like that. Everybody else's looks pretty much like Sullivan County. So that's basically the challenge, the benchmark that we face. We're growing, and nobody will deny that we're not growing. Our economy is actually doing well. GDP is not performing as well as what we'd like, but with an aging workforce and only about 53% of the people in the county in the labor force, it's still doing well. Now, I'm going to call it quits at that and let Jeff take over for a more detailed look, and then hopefully we'll have a little bit of time for some exchange, conversations, questions, and answers after. Thank you.
Thank you. Got it?
You need this?
Yeah, I got it. Thank you. Where's your clicker? Right here?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Don. Now if I can, these sleek modern pointers you can't hardly see. Okay. So MoveToKingsport.com is the 23-year overnight success story. A lot of folks think we've just been doing this for a few months since the pandemic began. Actually, the seeds were planted in the Economic Summit back in 1999. Ken Marsh and many Kiwanians over the years have served on the board for MoveToKingsport, saw the potential, and so it was always great to see the response and the commitment to trying to get people to come here. Now you got to remember, back in that time period, that's when Eastman had spun off, and we had NAFTA going on, and we had offshoring of jobs and downsizing of industry, and we had elected officials saying, last one out, turn out the lights. We're not going to be able to overcome this. This grand industrial city experiment is over, things like that. And you know, me as a young professional, I'm thinking maybe I ought to go look somewhere else to go for a job, because it doesn't sound too promising here. But thank goodness I didn't, because I've been around to experience the rest of the story, which was much more optimistic than we thought at the time. In 2006, we began the housing incentives and initiatives under John. I'll never forget John Campbell came into our staff meeting, and it's always a daunting task when you think the neighboring city manager is going to come in and be your city manager, and we saw them as a competitor all this time, and so now it's kind of like, wait a minute, we're supposed to talk about all our secrets now because now you're on our team, kind of thing. And John said, and I've said this a million times, and it really impressed me. I'll never forget it. He said, "What's the difference between the Rock Springs exit and the Boones Creek exit?" And we all looked at each other like we were all afraid to give the wrong answer. And he said, "That's right, nothing. There's no difference. There is no reason why people who work in Kingsport and live at the Boones Creek exit, that people can't live at the Rock Springs exit and work in Johnson City." He said, "We've got to start thinking about more regionally." And that was really where I started to open up and begin to think about, hey, we are way past the paradigm where people live and work in the same city and never go anywhere else. One spouse works someplace, another spouse works another place, some work from home. It's a whole mixed bag of what people do. So we went to Greenville, South Carolina to get some inspiration. And Mayor Knox White, who's still the mayor, by the way, said, we're the 30-year overnight success story. He said, we have been busting it in Greenville forever, but until we reached a cusp and people started noticing, we didn't think it was possible. Now Greenville is just an amazing place. Well, guess what happened today? On LinkedIn, I got a message from the data guy from the Greenville Chamber of Commerce saying, "How do you do that? How do you get this data?" And so I thought, God, we come full circle. How awesome is that? And so I had to explain to him that we came to Greenville to get advice, and now he's coming to us to get advice. So we basically started to put together all of the amenities and started to think about our region as from a different perspective. It wasn't about just Kingsport had this and Johnson City had that and Bristol had this. You looked at the whole Tri-Cities area. Somebody sent me a little snippy email one time and says, "Well, what do you tell them when they ask about our healthcare system?" And I said, frankly, I've never been asked about our healthcare system. I've been asked about where the VA hospital is, but it didn't stop them from moving to Kingsport, because wherever they are coming from, 20 miles is nothing. They don't think a thing about that. We had a conversation today. We were recruiting a physician just before I came over here. Yeah, John, I was dressed this way. And we were talking to him, and he was saying that he graduated and went to Vanderbilt and bought a house in East Nashville, and then they decided to have a baby. He said, Nashville's a pretty cool place to live till you have a baby. And then you got to think about schools, you got to think about paying your student loan debt off, you got to think about the cost of living, you got to think about the monumental traffic jams. And then he says, suddenly you start thinking, maybe Nashville would be a great place to visit occasionally, but maybe not live there all the time, And so he started looking for a place that had the same types of structural amenities in terms of taxes and things like that, and it led him to this area. And we were talking about, he's going to Arizona to do a year, and said, I was talking to a buddy from med school, and he said, if you live out west, he said, you may have to drive 2 hours to the nearest medical facility, and then you'll have to wait a few months to get your appointment. And he said, here, you can drive down Stone Drive. And I said, it's funny you say that, because I had an orthopedic appointment that I had to cancel. And I said, can I reschedule? I'm so sorry. And she said, well, yeah, is next week okay? And I was like, that'd be great, And I was just thinking, I just hung up with a person from Sacramento that said they've been waiting for 6 months to get in to see an orthopedic person. So we don't understand how good we have it here. Being at the airport, parking at the front door, walking in 20 minutes, getting through security, that's the standard by which we live. Believe me, the rest of the country doesn't live like that. And we are very blessed in that situation. So we started to collect all this, and we just began doing advertisements on Facebook. We advertise in various magazines, and we field comments. When we started advertising, our requests for information just went off the charts. And so to 2010, this is actually 2020 to 2021. This is 1 year, not 10 years or 11 years. But this is what happened during the pandemic. So you see, obviously, Tennessee. So green is growth, purple is negative. So LA County, the Bay Area, that little sliver is Portland, that's Seattle, King County. Look how distinct Illinois is in terms of shrinkage. And Chicago, okay? And then just north of us into eastern Kentucky, southwest Virginia, and West Virginia, we are on the precipice of being just like that. but we're not. Why is that? Because we have the same amenities that Nashville has to offer, and folks are looking here for that type of opportunity. If you ask me, now I tend to be optimistic, half full kind of guy, but Tennessee stands out pretty distinctly on that map. If you ask me, do you think? Do you agree? Okay, so in any other direction, all the way around, it's not that way, and it's all the way past Nashville to the second Tennessee River crossing. That's how popular Tennessee is right now. So you've seen this map a million times, but just as a reminder, we keep this map and we update it every month. We base it on water taps. So that is proprietary information that's not census data. So if you come in and you turn your water on, you give us your ID, you start your account, you give us your previous address, we know where you came from, we know what your billing status was there, and that dictates whether you pay the big fee or the little fee to turn your water on, basically. And that's how we track this. So we had no traction in the western United States prior. When I first got involved in this, that was almost non-existent. And now look at how many people from California and Seattle and Colorado have moved here. Florida is our number 2 state outside of Tennessee. I've been sharing a series on social media here recently about focusing on the states that are moving here, because people automatically say, you always hear the jokes, don't California my Tennessee and all this kind of stuff, or don't California my Texas and all that. Well, Tennessee is the one that's primarily moving here from outside the Tri-Cities region. It's the Knoxville Metro, the Nashville Metro, the Chattanooga, and even some Memphis are moving here. By far, it's our number 1. But then second place is Florida. North Carolina and California are tied for 3rd and 4th, and Virginia, which is our adjoining state, is 5th. So, getting from California to here is a pretty stiff commitment, right? My son met his new neighbor yesterday who just moved here from California. And he said, well, my wife's flying back tomorrow and I'm driving back. It's a 35-hour drive. And he said, we're going to keep our house in California. We're going to keep this house here. And it's like, why? How did you pick here? Well, my wife saw it on the internet and loved the house, and we just wanted to buy it. So we bought it and we were investing in it. And it's like, okay. And he owns a landscaping company in California, so hopefully it'll be nice, right? So, but that's what's happening. They're moving for all different kinds of reasons. This is the IRS data of adjusted income. Every time we turn our taxes in, we have to report how much our taxable income is that year. And now remember, that's how much your taxable income is, not how much your assets are, right? So you may have a lot more assets than you do taxable income. Well, the number 1 in the region from 2013 to 2019, and that's the most recently available data, is 2019, is by far Sullivan County. That's in terms of in-migration versus out-migration. Number 2 is Greene County. Number 3, Johnson County. 4 is Washington County. Carter County, Unicoi County. Now, the flip side of that, and I didn't make these numbers up, I didn't in any way manipulate them, but the counties that grew were in Tennessee, the counties that shrank were in Virginia. And that's over a 2013 to 19 pre-pandemic period. Okay, so this has nothing to do with COVID or any of that kind of stuff. So are you as surprised to see that as I was when it came up like that? I would have never assumed that Sullivan County had the highest net in-migration of income in the region, but we do. So I presented this at the state planning conference, and we were talking about sustainable growth. How much is too hot, how much is just right, and how much is too cold. And I hate to see the word too cold by Kingsport, but to put things in perspective, right now, we sold 2,700 homes since March of 2020 in the Kingsport area. And we are talking about needing new school facilities. We're talking about all kinds of growth-related issues. That's with 2,700 homes sold, and even I think 2,500 on the drawing board. If we add what we sold plus what's on the drawing board, well, look at Murfreesboro. 20,000 sales since March of 2020, Rutherford County alone. Okay, 48% of that's new construction since 2011. Only 7% of ours is new construction. If D.R. Horton had not come on our doorstep, I don't know where we would be. We would not have any substantial new construction going on. I hope they are wildly successful, and I hope they attract other folks that are interested in investing as well. But you look at this list, even Johnson City, we all tend to kind of compare ourselves to our nearest neighbor. And while Washington County is doing pretty good in terms of population growth, it is not even close to what's happening in the rest of the state. Okay, so we can't just look around, or Washington County officials can't just look around and say, well, we're okay, it's everybody else that's the problem. We are all collectively the problem. If Southwest Virginia suffers, we suffer economically. If Carter County, Hawkins County suffers, we all suffer, the economy suffers in all of us. And this clicker. Bristol is the lowest with 3% inventory. The Advanced Bristol people reached out to me the other day talking about, hey, what can we do to get on this bandwagon and recruit people? I said, you got to have inventory. You don't need $1 or more marketing materials. You don't need any more chamber publications. You need inventory, and you need to do whatever you possibly can to recruit people to build houses in your sphere of influence. And the one thing I did learn that I didn't appreciate is Kingsport acquired all the utility districts that adjoined the city limits years and years and years ago. Well, Bristol didn't. So you are at the mercy of the utilities as to where your sewer and your water is going. And so they are surrounded on two sides by private utility districts who may not be as excited about growth and investment as cities would be. So that's truly a blessing for us. So we control everything from Central High School out to the Geraldstown exit on 81 in Greene County, and are very eager to see growth. As an old planner, I love to see, we see the new construction with D.R. Horton coming in, but what they're doing is generating excitement in the neighborhood or in the city, and it's causing people to feel positive and optimistic enough to reinvest in older homes. Check out this house this is on Putnam Street. Well, where's Putnam Street? Oh, it's about 2 blocks from D.R. Horton development. It's in the Roosevelt School District. Meadow Lane out in Colonial Heights, built in 1961. Putnam Street, 1950. 1005 Catawba Street, it's like one house away from Cora Cox Academy, built in 1938. 917 Walnut Street, also right near the new D.R. Horton development at the old Stonegate Walmart. You see this reinvestment. That makes an old planner's heart swell because you want to see these traditional homes get loved on. Buyers have been willing to pay for good design. These are the same 4 homes. The house on Walnut Street sold for $44,000 in 2020. It just sold for $169,900 in 2022. Okay, so if somebody comes in and invests what's required, the market has sustained that. I honestly don't think that would be possible if they weren't doing what they were doing over at the Stonegate Walmart site. Meadow Lane in Colonial Heights, split foyer, pretty traditional. This is a 1961 house, sold for $200,000 in 2021, sold for $375,000 after renovations in 2022. I used to sit and watch HGTV and think, that's crazy, who would do that? How's that work? It's happening here now, and in my opinion, in a positive way. The house on Putnam Street, again, close to the D.R. Horton development off Stone Drive, $80,000 in 2021, sold for $237,000 in 2022. That's just 1 block off Sevier Terrace Drive, between Stone Drive and Sevier Terrace Drive. And then Catawba Street, the house that's right next to Cora Cox Academy, it sold for $66,000 in 2015, $168,000 in 2019, and it currently sold for $268,000 in 2022. Why is that? Check out this house. Boarded up windows, security fence, burned out on the inside, sold for $525,000 in LA, $100,000 over asking price. Okay? That's what they're looking at. So, the house I was telling about that next to my son's, it's like an $850,000 house, and he's like asking my son, who doesn't live in an $850,000 house, hey, is that house available? Is that one? Because we got a great price on this one. Son's going, you paid $850,000, you want to spend more? But that's what they're used to in other states. The reasons why they're moving here, and John asked me to really cover this a little bit, the absolute number one reason is a job. Okay, if they're coming here for a job, that is the primary driver, bar none. So it's critically important that we continue to try to get as many jobs as we can. But if it's discretionary, then it's retirement or work from home, okay? So discretionary, it gives you more discretion in your ability to choose. But what they're looking for is a high quality of life and low cost of living. They start checking boxes and say, where's my money in retirement going to go the farthest? Who has the amenities that I'm accustomed to? Who hasn't big enough to have an airport but small enough not to have traffic? And you start adding all these things up and you think, it's us. It matches a lot, it matches great. Larger homes, they get more square foot for the money, top-rated education systems. Even if they don't have kids in the school, we encourage them to look at niche.com, because if a community invests in its schools, it invests in other things. Because if you just want to live in a cheap place and be totally responsible for your own services, you can do that. But if you find a community that invests in itself, it makes a big difference. I spoke to somebody who bought their dream home in Butler on Watauga Lake, and they had their husband had a medical event when they moved in. And she called, she didn't think about any of this stuff. It was just a pretty house on the lake. She called 911, Carter County 911 answered the phone, and she said, my husband has collapsed, he's laying on the floor. We'll send somebody. How long will it be? Probably about 40 minutes to get to where you are. And she said, well, will you stay on the line with me? I'm terrified. I'm not from here. I don't know anybody. She said, honey, there's no way I can stay on the phone with you. I've got other calls coming in. And she hung up. This family was retired Disney folks that had moved up here for their dream experience, but they hadn't done their research. And so that's where I fit in, not to belittle anybody else, but I try to get people to think about a day in your life. What foods are you accustomed to buying? How close do you want a restaurant? Do you expect to have DoorDash available to come to your door? What happens when you call 911? Are you going to have a certified paramedic show up, or are you going to have a volunteer? All these things, and that's where we fit in. We have fantastic services in that regard. And family friendly always ends up being a big attraction for us. WJHL is doing a story, and so I'm sharing this with y'all for the first time that anybody's seen this. Young professionals are having an event next week at Eastman, with Eastman at the Chamber. And so the WJHL was asking me, hey, can you tell me what's going on with young professionals in Kingsport? What's going on with work from home, and what's going on with retirees? And so I pulled some data this morning from the census, and the latest available data is 2019. So again, this is pre-pandemic, but this is a 10-year change. So workers 29 and younger, we have gone up 16% in 10 years in Kingsport. Females about the same, 8.3% earning more than $33 a month. That's a number that the Census Bureau uses. That's considered the higher pay range for what they analyze. I know that's not necessarily a high number, but that's what we do. Manufacturing's up 4% and so on. But you can see, by comparison to Johnson City, they went up 11%, we went up 16%, and then they went up 7%, when we went up 8.3%. That's not something that I think people expect to hear when they compare Kingsport to Johnson City in the terms of young professionals. Households with retirement income, we had an 11.9% increase. Johnson City had 9.9%. Households with retirement income, we had a 23% increase, and Johnson City had 19%. Percentage of households, we had almost 2.3 compared to 1.5. So we have been attractive to both young professionals and retirees. And then finally, again, this is pre-pandemic, we had 3,363 people that their job was more than 50 miles away. If you remember John Clark when he was mayor, his job was in Greenville, South Carolina, but he lived in Kingsport. He went to Greenville a couple times a month. Otherwise, he lived here. That's what people are doing now with work from home. And that's been happening for a long period of time. And so I was talking to my colleagues in Johnson City. I said, I know work from home is a big deal for y'all right now, and you're really focusing on it. I said, it's increased 27.1% in the past 10 years, but that was before the pandemic. So what's it going to be? I'm anxious to see the numbers after the pandemic's over. That's all I got. Happy to answer any questions if we have time, or stay afterwards.